Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November 2nd meeting of the Baltimore City Planning Commission. My name is Eric Stevenson, Vice Chair of the Commission. Seated next to me is Director Ryer, Secretary of the Commission. Mr. Secretary, would you please call roll?
Thank you. Robin Allen.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Marcia Collins.
Present.
The Honorable Eric Costello is not present. Talib Horn. Present. Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Doug McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams.
Present.
And Eric Stevenson.
Present. Next, we've got the approval of the minutes from our October 12th meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? Does anyone have any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, we've got the CIP transfers from the October 18th Board of Estimates meeting. There were 5 items. Are there any questions? We'll move together the 2 items. We also have the November 1st Board of Estimates meeting. 4 items. Any questions on either item?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any-
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on the consent agenda, we've got minor subdivision final plans, 1601 Guilford Avenue. Any questions on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Next on the consent agenda, minor subdivision final plans, 4517 Hazelwood Avenue in the 2nd District. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Finally, on the consent agenda, major subdivision final plans, 6435 and 6437 Sedonia Avenue in the 2nd District. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. That will bring us to our regular agenda. Just a point of order, if anyone is here for item number 8, minor subdivision final plans, 3660 York Road, or item number 9, the rezoning of 3500 West Forest Park Avenue. Those items have been postponed. Mr. Secretary, if you could please introduce agenda item number 7.
Sure. First item on the regular agenda is fiscal year 2026 and 2027 loan authorization for general obligation bonds. Kristen Ahern will present.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here today to present recommendations for the 2024 loan authorization. This is for fiscal years 2026 and 2027 GO bonds. As you know, general obligation bonds are a relatively small but important part of the city's capital budget. They're some of the most discretionary funds that we have to be used for the highest priorities for the city. They're critical for items that have no other funding source, and they're often used to match and leverage state and federal funds. In fiscal 2024, they were about 10% of the total capital budget, but 63% of the local non-utility funds that we had available for priority projects. As you know, the authorization starts with the Planning Commission's recommendation. After the Planning Commission makes a recommendation, it goes to the Board of Finance and Board of Estimates for review and approval. In January, it goes to the Baltimore City delegation to the General Assembly for review and approval, and then on to City Council, and finally results in voter action on the 2024 general election ballot. So because they are backed by the full faith and credit of the city, GO bonds have to be authorized by voters in order for the city to use and budget. We are proposing that in 2024, we present to voters a total of $125 million per year in GO bond authorization, or $250 million for the 2-year total. Broken down as shown on your screen, with $20 million for affordable housing, $55 million for schools, $50 million for community and economic development, and $125 million for public infrastructure. To compare it to the current authorization, which was voted on in 2022 for fiscal years 24 and 25 capital budgets, we are going from $14 million to $20 million for affordable housing, 38 to 55 for schools, 36 to 50 for community and economic development, and $72 million to $125 million for public infrastructure. This is one of the largest increases, the largest increase in recent history, about, I believe, a 56% increase. We're really excited about this. Obviously, you all know how tight things get with the capital budget, so this is a step in the right direction to be able to fund more of our critical needs, state of good repair projects, and priority capital projects. Just to dig into the details a bit, the affordable housing loan sets aside funding for any activity that promotes the mayor's affordable housing plan for the city. So eligible uses include acquisition, preservation, new housing, demolition, rental assistance, and really a wide variety of things as long as they result in affordable housing. There's no income limit. It's not, sometimes people ask what percent of AMI the housing is for, and this particular source is not limited. The schools loan, exciting to be able to contribute more to the school system. We're going from $38 million over 2 years to $55 million. So this is complementary to the 21st Century Schools Initiative, the $1 billion program to renovate or replace, I think, 26 schools now. This funds major renovations and replacements outside of that program, as well as systemic projects like roofs, HVACs, envelopes, envelope repairs, windows for schools that aren't being completely renovated or replaced. The Community and Economic Development Loan has a variety of eligible uses, anything related to community economic development, like strategic acquisition, demolition, relocation, home ownership, repair incentives, infrastructure projects when they're related to major developments, business incentives, that sort of thing. This is used to fund a lot of the work in HCD and BDC's capital budgets. And then finally, public infrastructure. We're really excited to be able to go up to $125 million per year in 26 and 27. So we talk a lot about deferred maintenance at the city and ask agencies to present their deferred maintenance backlog each year. And this will make a lot of progress in getting to where we need to be investing to keep up with the state of repair for our public infrastructure. So this encompasses infrastructure, parks, playgrounds, rec centers, courts, libraries, health centers, all the public buildings, the office building we're in today, the elevators in those buildings perhaps, roofs, windows, etc. It also covers solid waste facilities, and it's written such that it can include IT infrastructure when appropriate. So this will generally be the GeoBond question used in DGS, Rec and Parks, solid waste, IT, and there might be one other agency I'm missing, but those are the big ones. And so with that, we recommend approval of the 2024 GeoBond loan authorization. Did you all have any questions?
Thank you so much, Kristen. Questions, starting with Commissioner Jolin?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner McCoach?
I have a quick question for you. So it's fantastic that we have this opportunity. I guess I was wondering, in terms of allocation of the Go Bond funds, is it the agencies or city council or the mayor that establishes a priority for, why is it $125 million for infrastructure versus 150 or 110? How do you arrive at that sort of distribution?
Generally, we're looking at things like the state of good repair backlog, the number of assets that an agency has to maintain, and then other priority programs like of the city, like the vacant buildings initiative. So we kind of look at the history of the breakdown, and then we look at the current proposed amount and make a recommendation. We kind of understand that it's still not enough to fully meet the needs for any of those areas
Okay.
in particular.
And this being the beginning of the process, as it goes through city council, it's vetted, and I'm sure amended and updated. Great, thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Collins?
I just wanted to ask, how are we excitingly been able to boost what we are going to put out for bonds? What was the decision process that led to that ability to do it this year?
We work closely with Department of Finance, who has recognized, they've been kind of listening to us and then doing some benchmarking against other cities to look at a target investment amount for capital. And it's been part of their 10-year plan. The Department of Finance is doing a 10-year financial plan for the city. That process is underway right now. So they kind of set a goal as part of that to increase investment. And so this year they made a decision that they could start to incrementally ramp up to a target amount. I think that the eventual target is still to be determined, but they kind of recognize this pretty dramatic need. And since we planned so far ahead, this sort of coincides with when we will no longer have access to ARPA dollars as a city and, take advantage of the capacity that agencies may be building to spend their ARPA dollars to continue to implement capital projects.
Thank you.
Commissioner Horn?
No questions.
Councilman Costello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, thank you for simply doubling the amounts across the board and not making this a more complicated situation than it needed to be. Two, I do have a series of concerns with our capital spending. This isn't necessarily the appropriate forum to bring that up, but I wouldn't want to take this opportunity to have this conversation and not reference the fact that I have concerns with the way we've been spending capital dollars in the city, and we'll certainly use the opportunity to bring that up in other forums. That's not directed at the Department of Planning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I don't have any further questions. You touched on mine. So thank you, Commissioner Collins. Thank you, Kristen. Commissioner Allen. Commissioner Allen, you out there? Do you have any questions for Kristen about the presentation? We'll open it to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question about the GEO bond program? And Mr. Tiso, do we have anyone online? All right, then I will close the public testimony. Any discussion amongst the commission? I do think it's, as we said, exciting that we can increase funding for these important areas.
I believe this is the biggest jump in the history of GL bonds for the city. The last time we went from 65 to 80. This time we're going from 80 to 125. Administration has heard that we're grossly underfunded in the capital budget, and this is the first step towards remedying that. It's a big deal.
Excellent. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve?
Robin Allen?
Did we have a second?
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Robin Allen? Not hearing him. Marcia Collins?
Approve?
The Honorable Eric Costello?
Approve.
Talib Horn?
Approve.
Claudia Jolin?
Approve.
Doug McCoach?
Approve.
Justin Williams?
Approve.
And Eric Stevenson.
Approve. Thank you very much. All right, it's 1:30. Meeting is back in session. Mr. Secretary, if you'd introduce agenda item number 10.
Thank you. Agenda item number 10 is City Council Bill number 23-0436, an urban renewal for Brooklyn and Curtis Bay Renewal Area Designation and Urban Renewal Plan in the 10th Councilmatic District. Jasmine Kimball will present.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. I'm here on behalf of City Council Bill 23-0436, requesting renewal for the Brooklyn Curtis Bay Business Area Urban Renewal Plan. My name is Jasmine Kimball. The bill is in the Southern District, where I am the district planner, and the petitioner is Councilwoman Felicia Porter. At this time, I would like to recognize that present today are members from the Brooklyn Curtis Bay community. We have Jan Evelyn, who is the president of Action Baybrook, and Andrea Mayer, who is the president of Concerned Citizens of Better Brooklyn. Concerned Citizens for a Better Brooklyn, yes. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this map shows the boundary of the Brooklyn Curtis Bay Urban Renewal Plan. It includes both sides of Patapsco Avenue between the Harbor Tunnel Thruway and Pennington Avenue. And then it also includes both sides of Pennington Avenue between Patapsco Avenue and Cedex Street. And then here are aerial photos of showing the area. First one is in satellite view. And then the next one is showing the boundary and context of a map of the surrounding area. The Brooklyn Curtis Bay Business Area Urban Renewal Plan was originally approved by the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore by Ordinance Number 852 on December 21st, 1982. And since its inception, there have been 6 amendments, with the most recent being Council Bill Number 210162 in 2022. Current legislation, Council Bill Number 23-0436, was introduced on October 2nd, 2023. The purpose of the amendment in April 2022 was to extend the duration of the Urban Renewal Plan. That plan was set to expire in December 2021 and was extended for an additional 2 years. Next slide. Oh, right there? Okay, thank you. Okay. So the primary goal of this urban renewal plan is to provide requirements and standards designed to ensure that any new uses and development proposed in Brooklyn Curtis Bay enhance the viability, stability, attractiveness, and convenience for residents and businesses in Brooklyn Curtis Bay and of the city as a whole. Some additional goals include: 1, protecting the existing architectural and historic character of Brooklyn Curtis Bay by ensuring that the design of new structures, the rehabilitation of existing structures, and new uses will be consistent with the scale and architectural design of Brooklyn Curtis Bay. 2, establishing a positive image for the community. 3, encouraging a diversity of uses within the community. And 4, providing an opportunity for the community organizations to provide commentary on certain renewal actions taking place within the project area. Okay. The purposes of the repeal and placement of this urban renewal plan are to update the existing language to match the modernized Baltimore City zoning code, to remove outdated language that no longer reflects actual neighborhood conditions, and to clarify land use provisions and design guidelines. Okay. These are the key components of the draft Brooklyn Curtis Bay Urban Renewal Plan, which includes land use provisions, review of developer's plan, a law section that includes urban renewal terms with definitions, procedures for amendments, separability, applicability, and an Appendix A for design guidelines. This is the land use provisions table that incorporates prohibited uses within the urban renewal plan area and including the zoning code. X stands for prohibited uses. X stands for prohibited use in the draft urban renewal plan for the applicable zoning category. Prohibited uses that were added to the draft from the existing plan includes animal clinic, bail bond establishment, body art establishment, daycare center, healthcare clinic, kennel, residential care facility, retail big box establishment, room and house, taverns, truck repair, and video lottery facility. This bill will serve as an additional resource for the Brooklyn Curtis Bay community to encourage a positive and viable commercial corridor with the enforcement of certain uses and design standards. All active community organizations within Brooklyn and Curtis Bay were notified, and that includes the following: Action Baybrook, Concerned Citizens for a Better Brooklyn, Community of Curtis Bay Association, Greater Baybrook Alliance, and addition of other community leaders, residents, and property owners. And there were community meetings for educational and engagement purposes of the urban renewal plan. There were public postings at 3 locations within the urban renewal plan boundary, and there were letters sent out to 515 property owners within the Brooklyn Curtis Bay urban renewal plan area. We recommend approval with amendments. This is a list of recommended amendments that include updating prohibited uses in Table 1 to include all zoning categories. Also includes making language consistent in Appendix B, removing Section C to B so that the requirements of Appendix B apply to industrial zoned areas within the urban renewal plan boundaries. More recommendations include minor edits for the design review and approval section, which includes removing community organization board or its assignee and replacing it with community organizations identified in this plan. removing landmark structure in section A to M, changing Curtis Bay Community Association, replacing it with Community of Curtis Bay Association, and prohibiting all motor vehicle service and repair in all of the zoning designations of the URP. And then these are the remaining amendments. That includes prohibiting rooming houses, residential care facilities, taverns, truck repair, and video lottery facilities in all zoning designation, removing the acquisition and disposition maps. The acquisition authority expired, and DHCD doesn't need disposition authority anymore. Edits to the design guidelines, and the planning department and the law department reviewed the Brooklyn Curtis Bay Business Area Urban Renewal Plan draft for legal sufficiency in cases where items were not enforceable. Language was changed from required to recommended. Additional technical edits for legal sufficiency, clarity, and adherence to the zoning code. And that's all the remaining edits, amendments. And the community organizations have been consulted and agree with these recommended amendments. And thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Jasmine. Any questions? I'll start down this end, Deputy Mayor.
The amendment list, I'm trying to pull up from your staff report. Can you explain the rationale behind? I had it in my head, and now I can't find it. I guess, well, body art establishment removal.
From the, removing it from the table?
Yes.
Yes, in a recent community meeting, it came up in conversation. A community leader had said that they don't think body art establishment would be disruptive or negative. And so there was an agreement to remove it. But then in a recent email, actually, I sent it to Eric early. I don't know if not sure if you received it yet. But in that email, some of the community leaders talked since that meeting and actually want it to be removed. But that's why that's in there from Monday's discussion, to remove it.
Well, I guess so. Was one question to remove, but then even the first bullet point, are you trying to include every use in the code that could be approved or could be allowed in this urban renewal plan boundary? So I mean, trying to harmonize the first two bullet points is the question I'm getting at. So it seems like based on my reading of your first bullet point is that you're trying to have every possible use that could be conceived of in the urban renewal plan boundary, and then go through the ones that would be prohibited. Or am I reading that incorrectly?
That one, so since the bill was introduced, the community wanted to update that list to include additional. So for some of the uses, when you see in the table, say, for example, it might say prohibited in like 2 zoning categories. They want it prohibited in all of the zoning categories. So there were updates there, if that makes sense.
Wait, are you trying to include, I'm still confused, you're adding the zoning district, potential zoning districts, or the uses, I guess, is which one are you trying to include? So the recommended update, so you're trying to include all zoning categories. Is that
Oh, I'm
uses or
sorry.
zoning
I'm
districts?
explaining it wrong.
A permitted use list or a prohibited?
It's prohibited use list, but I am explaining it wrong. I'm sorry. It slipped my mind for a second. So initially, from the draft, it did not have all of the zoning categories. It was missing, what is OC? I'm missing, what's the office?
OIC.
Yes, OIC. And then it was missing another category. Let me go back actually to the table because it's in there now. Oh, IMU, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the original table was missing OR1 and IMU. The community wanted to include OR1 and IMU, so they wanted the table to reflect prohibited uses in those categories as well. Because initially it didn't show the categories because there were no uses prohibited in those categories, but they wanted uses to be prohibited in those categories. So that's what that first bullet point means.
So this table that's on the PowerPoint is the version you proposed to have us adopt?
Yes. Correct. And then for that, the second bullet, asking to remove body establishment. Body art establishment was in the draft, but since the draft, it was initially agreed to remove it. So that's why that bullet point is saying remove body art establishment from table 1.
So that would make them a permitted use if it's removed from the table.
It would make. Oh, yeah, it would make it a permit, yeah.
So, sorry, I turned my mic on so it can be heard. So I think to clarify, this is a prohibited use table. So by removing it, it will re-enable that use as per the
Yes.
underlying zoning, just to detangle that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes.
If I understand that terrible, then, does it suggest that body art establishments are permitted in R5 through R8? Because there's no X there?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Under the URP, but obviously the zoning code doesn't allow
okay.
it. Okay, so that's helpful on that one, and then, so I guess can you go back, stay on that table?
Oh, yeah.
So then, what's the rationale for the daycare center being prohibited in OR1?
You said R1?
The OR1, the
Oh,
daycare center?
OR1. That is something, that's something that the community wanted. Yeah.
I mean, I guess they can speak to it, but.
Yeah, they can
Can
speak
you
to
channel
it.
their rationale?
Yeah, they have put together a list of reasonings of why they asked for certain uses to be prohibited in certain categories.
Well, I guess from your perspective, as a planner, well, I don't want you to, if you're just taking the community's perspective and delivering, I understand, but the reason, what I'm getting at is I'd prefer to have daycare available everywhere we can. We should be promoting the ability to have daycare, make it easier to do. So unless there's a rationale to the contrary, I'd propose to allow it, but I'm open to hearing why they don't want to have it there. I guess the other question, I don't know if law, looking at the council page, if laws weighed in on like the residential care facility. So actually, do you know if the law department has weighed in on this yet?
Yeah, they saw the plan and looked at it. Yeah,
And did they comment?
they didn't give. They were still looking at it. They didn't give many comments as of yet. The only agency that gave comments back was DHCD.
Typically, they'll provide their comments to the council,
Yeah.
not to the commission.
Right, but I don't know, I just don't know if you've seen. What I'm getting at is I suspect they would flag the residential care facility, any size prohibition would be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And so trying to get ahead of it would propose or think through, could we have other provisions in the URP that could be allowed, thinking ahead, like things like licensing requirements or something to make it, I get the community's concerns, but then
Yeah.
to not, if we're gonna spin our wheels, don't have something that will not be enforceable.
Yeah, and for some of these, there's a and they'll explain more when they come up. But there's an oversaturation of some of the uses, and that they do have concerns. So that's why for that one, they just rather, they would rather no sizes be allowed. Residential care facility is a big concern for them, as well as another use.
Okay, well, I guess then, well, the other question is, for thinking through options, is there a time sensitivity to this?
This plan, yes,
What is that?
it expires in December 31st.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Collins?
Oh, I just lost my screen. Just give me a second here. So I did read through the plan, and typically we see these bills. I represent the Department of Public Works on this body, but typically we see these things and we have a more general overview, and we're just looking at things specific to our agency. But in reading the plan and looking at the appendices, there was obviously, I'm sorry, there was obviously an interest in seeing what kind of visual activities could happen on buildings that would enhance the community as a whole, both not just the historic, but the artistic. So I was curious why, since it was obviously of interest at one point, why the appendix on the guideline for artistic expression is being removed. Is it?
Yeah, that was an era when legal was creating the document. So for this plan, they wanted it to match with Charles North plan. That was an appendix from Charles North specifically. So that's why it's being removed. Because initially it wasn't, yeah, it was in a template that they used.
So they didn't want it, or?
No. It was a template that was used from the Charles North Urban Renewal Plan.
Okay, and
yeah.
so since that time, which I'm assuming was the original, one of the original versions, it was there, but in the light of current situations, they don't see a value for it.
No, because for the Charles North plan, if I believe correctly, they have arts program.
Yeah, they have an arts and entertainment
So that
district.
it was created specifically for that.
Okay,
And so they just didn't see a use for it.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Horn?
No questions, just eager to hear the community and their perspective.
Councilman Costello? No questions. Commissioner Jolene?
Thank you so much. Can you give me a little bit more detail on the acquisition authority, the expiration, how that happened, and why there's a desire to remove that or not
Yes.
put that in?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so that was created, the last time that was updated was 2021. And where you see the red boundary, that's where the acquisition, that's the boundary for the acquisition. So that's why I was saying, the extension of the boundary. There were about, I believe, 3 properties in there, for Hanover Street. But it had expired since then, so we had a conversation internally if it was necessary to keep the acquisition authority and disposition. We spoke to DHCD about it, and there was no longer a need for it.
Okay, thank you.
On that topic, sorry to jump in, because I'm looking at Code Map and I see not every property's in city ownership. So I guess the question is, are we sure? Like how closely did we look at this to make sure the acquisition authority is not needed?
Is not what? I'm sorry.
Are we sure it's not needed? So I'm looking at Code Map and only 2 of the 4 or 5 properties are in city ownership. So maybe Code Map's delayed. And my fear would be that we're being too hasty and we will lose the authority if we're like in the process of acquiring certain parcels that haven't been wrapped up yet.
So to maybe help out with some of that, so one of the concerns that came up actually was through the courts, that we couldn't just leave perpetual acquisition authority, so we had to renew it every 4 years. And so every time we see these come back, the list is getting shorter. So housing didn't have a strong feeling that they needed to retain the authority here, but they have other tools that are available. So it doesn't necessarily prevent them from acquiring if they have to. This was just one way to do it, but they didn't think it was emergent enough. I think last time we only saw 5 URPs come through, so that list is getting shorter.
Great. Commissioner McCutch?
No questions.
Commissioner Allen?
I see her microphone lighting up. She's been sending me messages that she's talking, but we're not hearing her. So I can relay any comments if she would like.
So I just have some general questions. So I think I understand there's an existing urban renewal plan that's expiring.
Yes.
This is technically a repeal and replace, but we're basically updating it. Is that correct to say?
Yes.
Some of the updates are technical in nature, making the plan match our current zoning. In addition to that, there are some changes being made. Is that also correct?
Yes.
And so a lot of that stuff on table 1, the prohibited uses, is that all existing, all new, or a mix?
It's a mix. So since the last plan amendment, we had transformed Baltimore, as we all know. So some of the uses within the existing plan, those were out of date. So some like completely went away. The language was updated. Like there was a section for hotel, and now there was a section for hotel. There was another it was called something else for fuel station. So things like that. The language was updated, and then so there was that, and then also some uses were added to the table. Prohibited uses were added to the table. And the prohibited uses that were added, I'll name all the ones that were added that weren't there, even with the different name. And that was the body art establishment, daycare, healthcare clinic, kennel, residential care facility, the retail for big box establishment, taverns, truck repair, and video lottery facility. So all those have been added in addition to the existing.
Thank you. And this question's actually for you, Mr. Secretary. Are we allowed to do that?
Good question. So let's first not let the good be the enemy of the great. We're trying to update an urban renewal plan. However, we also know that some of these actions could provoke a challenge, and we would probably not be successful in defending that challenge. So there are 2 issues here, I think. One, with some of the uses may trigger a fair housing reaction, may trigger concerns about impact on a protected class. And then there's the larger concern about due process and removing uses that the zoning code allows without going through the same process as changing the zoning code. The process of an urban renewal plan does not entail notification to every property owner as a city council ordinance does. So there are two kinds of issues here that make it difficult to enforce some of these restrictions.
Thank you. I'll think about that. Can anyone tell me what the impact, because I heard that there's a saturation of some of these uses, and that's part of the motivation here. What would be the impact on existing uses that became non-conforming? So like if there was a daycare or a group home.
If I'm right, there wouldn't be.
Well,
So I can answer generally since I'm not an expert on this particular URP, bless you, because some of them are slightly different. So unless there's a specific provision in this plan, it would be treated the same way as a zoning, which means that the non-conforming use can continue because they were lawfully established, but if they ever stop, then they're done. This actually aligns more closely to what used to happen in certain URPs, because our old zoning code allowed the recreation or restarting of certain non-conforming uses. We took that away in the current zoning code, and so that kind of aligns it.
typically, urban renewal plans use the term non-complying for non-conforming zoning uses. Does this plan use those terms?
It
and what do
uses
they say?
non-conforming.
Pardon?
It uses non-conforming. Do you mean non-conforming versus non-compliant?
Does this plan include a non-complying clause?
Oh, a non-compliant clause.
To get at your question. So a non-compliant clause could prevent
I don't think it,
the
yeah.
expansion, for example, of a non-conforming use.
Yeah, I don't think it includes.
I suspect it would not need to because our current zoning code restrictions are more stringent than they used to be for the older URPs that were created before the 2017 code. So under the old zoning code, there were small expansions of a non-conforming use that could be done. There was also the ability, if they terminated in some zoning districts, they could be brought back. And so at that time, URPs had that non-complying text to stop that. So our current zoning code does not allow you to expand a non-conforming use, and if it's gone for good. So I think that's obviated at this point, so I would suspect it's not needed in this URP plan because our base zoning requirements are more stringent.
Thank you.
Great. That's all for now. I think we'd like to hear from the community.
Actually,
That's
I have
all.
one more question of
Sure,
Jasmine.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going through the Appendix B design guidelines. How closely, if at all, did you go through these to review, or was it kind of the template copied from elsewhere?
You said how closely?
Yeah. Like, did you go through these just with an eye towards being thoughtful about this community specifically, or was it this like kind of a template copied from Charles North?
So I can explain the background. Are you saying because you see like certain things where?
Well, yeah, well, my next question would be then thinking through certain things that I see here that like my fear would be making it more difficult to rehabilitate properties down here in this neighborhood if we prohibit or require brick versus other types of materials.
Yeah. So when we were reviewing the older document, because the format was completely different than what it is now. So the community, Councilman Porter, and myself went through the original document and looking to see what we thought could be either added, removed, or changed. And then legal sort of took that and put it into that format. But when we were reviewing the document, we did look at it in that context.
Okay.
thank you, Jasmine. Is there anyone from the community who would like to speak about the plan?
And Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, there was a comment in the chat box from Yvette Emerson, who's here on behalf of Greater Baybrook Alliance, who serves the Brooklyn and Curtis Bay community. We support the proposed legislation. So I just wanted to share that for your use.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, I'm Jan Evelyn. I'm a Brooklyn resident, Councilman Costello. I'm a Brooklyn resident, I have a business in Brooklyn, and I am the volunteer/underpaid CEO of Action Baybrook, our illustrious nonprofit down there. And our Action Baybrook's mission is to dramatically reduce the number of problem and vacant properties, to address blight, and to create economic opportunity. The Brooklyn, Curtis Bay leadership, resident leaders have been actively involved in this process. Just this past Monday, we met with Jasmine, of course, Ben Guthorn, Shay Beitler-Ackman from DHCD Code Enforcement, with whom we work closely, Councilwoman Porter, her staff, and several residents and representatives of community organizations. So more than in the past, the community has been able to take an interest and have more of an impact. And we're very pleased about that. We are a majority-minority community in the very southernmost part of Baltimore City. We are overlooked, forgotten, and mostly people don't think we exist. About 40% of our population has no access to a car and no internet. So we're sort of starting from ground zero. In the past, we have lacked the capacity to enforce the tools we're given and to have input on this kind of a legal change. Thanks, at least in part, to a city grant that we received, we now have some resources that allow us to be able to start to address some of these things. Using those resources, we've renovated problem vacant homes for home buyers. We have displaced drug dealers with homeowners. We're acquiring property in our commercial corridor for use for community uses. We're working with the state of Maryland to remediate a 17-acre brownfield, which is part of what you saw on the map, half owned by Baltimore City and half by the state. And we're pursuing irresponsible, non-compliant liquor establishments at the Liquor Board. We're also creating a problem property database, and we are developing vacant and problem property remediation standards. And one of the tools that we've been able to use in rebuilding our community is our existing urban renewal plan. And it's not that difficult to figure out what's enforceable and what isn't, because we 311 it, and DHCD enforcement says, nope, can't do it. So we have used that method for determining, for kind of winnowing down some of these uses. Regarding a couple of the uses, one that we object to and that appear in the table. Oh, by the way, one of the corrections to the table was that the table was missing two of the zoning categories that were actually included in the boundaries of the urban renewal plan. So we just wanted it to be consistent for the whole plan instead of two little teeny parcels kind of sticking out. Excuse me. One of the prohibited uses, and it's actually been a prohibited use for a long time, is auto repair, various auto repair. And that's because of oversaturation. I can tell you in 3 blocks of our downtown, there are 6 auto repair shops. We really just don't need any more. So that is why we have included that in here, although enforcement is very difficult, because I think one of you pointed out that if an auto repair goes out of business, nobody knows that. A new one just comes in, starts right up. So we don't know to intercept that. So we're actually trying to work with planning and DHC enforcement to figure out how we would do that. The other is healthcare clinics, and you rightly picked on that. Our problem is that we have currently 16 methadone and mental health clinics, and 2 of those are very large residential treatment centers. We have some of those are owned by people with criminal records. Some of them are owned by people who allegedly dilute the product and that sort of thing. So we have 16 of them. And they don't primarily serve our population. I'm not denying that we have a problem like everybody else in the United States, but we have over 1,000 patients coming to our community every day from somewhere else. And some of them, we have one clinic that has over 800 patients every day. And it's a block from the school, next door to the park, a half a block from the highest violent drug crime area in Baltimore City. So that sort of tells you what we're dealing with and why we're trying to address it. One of the problems with these clinics is, in fact, they bus people to their clinic from another neighborhood. So those people, when they're being bused, number one, of course, it's not a good treatment to have to go a long ways to get your treatment. That reduces the efficacy. Also, they have to wait for the bus. They pick up their methadone, and where are they waiting for the bus? In the highest violent drug traffic intersection in Baltimore City. So what we're trying to do is at least reduce the number of these clinics that come to our community. And I should say we're also working with the state of Maryland to try to get an area to try to have a needs assessment like they do for hospitals. Because of course, all these 16 that are in our neighborhood, they're not anywhere else. So if you need one, you don't have one. So the idea working with the state is to try to deal with the saturation issue. So this isn't the only thing that we're thinking about, but it is kind of a first line of defense. Let's see. You had asked about daycare. I couldn't agree with you more. We would love to have more daycare, but the problem is adult daycare. And that's not a problem in and of itself, but it is not defined in any restrictive way. So it can function as some sort of a treatment facility. It can function as people, I mean, you could even argue these people coming to being bused into the clinic are part of adult daycare. I mean, that's where our problem is. And our daycares that currently exist, I mean, are plagued by all the patients that are coming in and the violence that's attributable to a lot of the end results of that. So that's the purpose of that. The body art, as we say in the law, there's a mix in the circuits. What we have so far is people who attempt to open irresponsible body art shops and don't get licenses. And it then takes us a very, very, very long time to get them shut down. So we as residents are not in favor of that. Our local CDC, eager to fill space, thinks that body art is fine. And I have some body art myself. I am not morally opposed to it. I'm just aware of the kind of welcome sign that we put out for people who are less reputable. I think we are not, you had asked about the, I think, Appendix A. And part of the problem, as I think Ms. Kimball pointed out, was this was originally taken from the Station North plan. And so a lot of stuff ended up in this plan. We are not opposed to art, but we're not an arts district, so it's not particularly relevant to us. I mean, sure, we would love more art, but it just kind of doesn't belong in this plan. And my fellow residents have, asked me to come and give our views, and so I'm here along with concerned citizens for a Better Brooklyn to give our views and why we support this plan as amended. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Evelyn? Commissioner Collins?
First of all, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you for explaining some of the questions that we had on how this plan developed. I kind of need some clarification for myself. I know that the issue of overabundance of certain types of facilities and their uses gets you into some territory of, depending on what it is, how you can or cannot control it. So I don't know if I'm necessarily directing this at you, but I'm just wondering, we sort of addressed it, but how fine a line is this community walking here for making some of these recommendations? But don't go away, because I just need to know personally, where does that leave us as a commission?
As a commission, so I guess I just reiterate what I said earlier. Some of these uses are problematic citywide. They're not endemic to Brooklyn at all. And we have found that an urban renewal plan is not the right tool to regulate them. Distance standards have not been accepted by the courts as a tool that's allowable. And I think Eric's often beat this into our head. Licensing is a tool that can be used, but zoning is not.
Okay, so could I stop you right there? So in my limited experience with zoning issues, my understanding was that these types of plans could prohibit certain uses under their plan. So how do we slice and dice that? So they can prohibit an automotive use, but they can't, is it the old? Protected class issue that we're dealing with here solely?
I think we're talking about two different degrees.
Yeah.
And so at the strictest level, a protected class would not be able to be regulated by any zoning, by the zoning code itself, much less an urban renewal plan. The others are allowed by the zoning code, but not by the urban renewal plan. That presents enforcement challenges. We don't have urban renewal inspectors out there. Ultimately, it would be up to a court as to whether the urban renewal plan process justifies the restriction. And we have been, as a city, reluctant to take that to court because we thought we were not confident in our ability to defend it. So you're correct, there are two different issues here.
All right, good, thank you. And so my fellow commissioner mentioned the issue about requiring brick as a usage throughout. Do you see that as a problem to discourage people to reinvest, or? Because I'm assuming what you're trying to do is reflect the overall historic and general character of the neighborhoods that you live in.
If we were fortunate enough to still have any exposed brick, we would prefer to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
We have very little. I mean, we're formstone, we're concrete block, we're paint, it's a poor neighborhood. So what does somebody do? They slap a bunch of paint and then they paint the name of their business on it on a brick wall. I mean, it's not, we did review these guidelines, and what we asked for was merely clarity. That is, okay, which ones are mandatory, which ones are discretionary. And although it was mentioned that there are no urban renewal inspectors, I assure you there are. We're out there. And we will 311 you. So don't be thinking, we will test as far as we can the enforceability.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the commission?
I have, I think, a quick one. There's under, shortly below, in the staff report, shortly below table 1, there's a reference to the MISOD.
I'm sorry, to
And-
what?
Oh, it's the Maritime Industrial Zoning Overlay District.
Yeah.
Is that really relevant here?
That's an old zoning code reference. If it's still there, that would be a concern. We now have a waterfront overlay district under the current code. So again, I didn't read through this one since it came up through the community planning division. So I'm at a disadvantage for knowledge here, but if it says MISOD, that's an old reference.
And Deputy Director Tizo, you can correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but the MISOD 2.0, or the Waterfront Overlay District, performs a very similar function to MISOD. And Commissioner, one thing I would note, why MISOD and now the Waterfront Overlay District is critically important to acknowledge in general, and I'm speaking from the perspective of one of the 3 members out of 15 on the, or out of 14 on the council that represents the Port of Baltimore, is that apply, and I'm sure you know all this, but I'm just saying this for the public benefit. So please forgive me if you're aware of all this. There's only there's a finite amount of land that is directly adjacent to deep water. And that land needs to be protected at all costs from any type of development that is not a marine industrial use, because we only have, that finite quantity of that. And what comes along with that, and Deputy Director Tizo can chime in if I get anything wrong, are appropriate buffer zones in between that MISOD area. I just refuse to call it a waterfront. I'm sorry.
It's actually now the Maritime Industrial Zoning.
It's always going to be MISOD to me, but those buffer zones are important, and I think contextually in the zoning, it's important context. If that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Love being a maritime city.
I would
Anything else,
point out
Mr.
the plan
Lynch?
doesn't really have anything to do with that, but. I mean,
Also correct, but I try to take every, thank you, Ms. Evelyn, you're correct. But I do try to take every opportunity in a public forum to raise awareness of those protections and how critically important those protections are. The Port of Baltimore being responsible for 1/3 of the economic output of the entire region. It's critically important that, we just remind people of the importance of that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So here's my question. And as you've heard, some of our questions and discussion are not at all directed at you or the community. I certainly respect and understand the community's desire to manage these issues as part of your revitalization, and I have a lot of admiration for the good work that you guys are doing down there. So we want to support you and give you the tools that you need to work in your community. That being said, as a commission, we've been moving away from these urban renewal plans, and the last several that we've heard, we've extended specifically because there was kind of unfinished business and work that the community was actively engaged in, and that urban renewal plan provided a tool that they were still using, so we extended it. This seems like a little bit more than just an extension, sort of a reset, so to speak. And so one of my first question is, what would be the new expiration of this plan? Jasmine?
Yeah, it's, It's 7 years from now, December 31st, because it initially was supposed to be 10 years, but since the last bill extended it for 2 years, so it would have been 10 years, but now it's about 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
And so, Ms. Evelyn, for my benefit, could you maybe give an example or explain how this urban renewal plan and keeping it in place is important to work that you're currently doing?
Those prohibited uses that you saw in that table are not prohibited under the new zoning law. And in the past, and I'll just use auto repair because that's the easiest one, that has been prohibited for oh so very long. And only recently were we able to stop a particular car repair, because it was, of course, really a chop shop. And then, so it closed when its proprietors went to prison, but then a new person came in and wanted to do a very similar thing. And we were able to use actually, we're still trying to use this same code to prevent a new use like that, which is, and that particular property is also almost exactly adjacent to our brownfield. And our brownfield is currently functioning as a very large homeless encampment, which we're trying to work with the state of Maryland to do something about. So keeping in mind that we have 3 active homeless encampments within the urban renewal plan, we need to be a little more aggressive in that. But we are using the tools that were originally included in the urban renewal plan. What has changed is Transform Baltimore. So the uses, for example, we used to have prohibited storefront churches. Okay, now they're kind of prohibited because they don't meet the parking requirements, that kind of thing. But auto repair, I'm trying to remember some of the old uses because they're not the same. But let's see.
That's all right. But it sounds like the prohibited uses and the code enforcement benefits there are important to you.
Yes, they are making a very important difference. And just to kind of give a little emphasis to that, there was a time period of 2 months during which the urban renewal plan had expired and had not been removed. During that 2-month period, guess what happened? Somebody got a new permit for a car repair. That permit for that car repair blocks an alley every day. I have 311'd it 27 times. And DHCD enforcement is working on imposing fines. But that is a long and involved process. And that's 2 months. And it made that kind of difference. And by the way, that particular business was half a block from our public park. So we think that the urban renewal plan is crucial to our work because as Baltimore Peninsula comes online and people discover they can't possibly afford to live there, where are they going to live? Brooklyn, Curtis Bay. And we are improving. If you look at our home sales, those prices have gone up. When we originally renovated our vacant property, we estimated the after repair value was $185. We sold it for $225, and we had a contract for $250, but it didn't appraise. So that's just to give you an idea of where we're headed, and we need this tool to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Did you have anything else for us?
No, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else that wanted to speak on this topic?
Good afternoon. Okay, that's a tough act to follow. Let me say that.
Just state your name for the mic,
Nicole
please.
Davis. Nicolette Davis. Anyway, bear with me because I just got this in my hands today. I didn't know. And I think that's a lot of the problems in our neighborhoods is that we understand that the equity and the acquisition that homeowners bring. However, a neighborhood is made up than just more than homeowners. And then when it's become an inclusive thing, I think the neighborhoods gets better. And I'm saying that because I'm a native of Kansas City, Missouri. And we once upon a time was a model city. And so now I live in Brooklyn Park and work with those people. So I'm just trying to capitalize. I had to say that. And then bear with me again because it's kind of, I have questions and it's kind of all over the place. So you have to put it back together per se. So anyway, just to piggyback on what she said, on some of the things that people consider bad in our neighborhoods, I think trade schools and teaching people the proper way to repair or dispose of oil and things of that nature in our neighborhoods would be a solution. Again, I just got this in my hands today, so I don't really know the logistics of it all. Why not educate people on proper ways to get licensed, etc. Example, teen kids like riding bikes and motorbikes in our neighborhoods. Why not teach them how to get licensed and understand the law of licensing early with provision of some of the land that's in our area? Is it a new urban plan excluding previous overlooked issues? And I agree with her when she said that some plans kind of make cities take things over by eminent domain. And that's a lot of stuff that was happening in Kansas City when they was taking redlining districts and changing the zip codes and tunneling the money other places. And the economic development money was not actually community redevelopment acts, and that money was not actually going back into the neighborhoods. Example, homeowners was told when I first moved to Brooklyn that the bus was going down Church, which caused a problem. To me, being a person that's now transit person, or the big blue limousine as I call it, it seemed like when bus stops is there sometimes, it create a trash can. So people simple as that can throw trash cans in that area so it won't cause trash to be in our neighborhood sometimes. And so when bus stops is far in between, it makes people kind of frustrated and start throwing trash in our neighborhoods. And then moving on. The architecture, that's exclude sometimes, and I just learned that word on one of your maps, typology. And so with that, I would say neighborhood storytellers, the eras, which is the elders or people over 70 or whatever, look at art in which they actually live. The baby boomers glad to see the cover up, and the next generation, which is my generation, is asking for inclusive designing. And I'm saying people use the facade, which should be an actual design, the facade of that neighborhood of embracing everybody. And we know that we're living in an era with drugs and alcohol. However, with the new thing of so many marijuana things, I just think that some of that stuff we can use and capitalize on that. Excuse me, I gotta get back to my notes. Not just morals or murals, however, an inclusive manner to allow positive creativity. Copy, chop, and paste, meaning certain improvements with murals to hide overlooked blighted areas. And then I move to how effective will that be to previous issues before overlooking previous issues? Like, you know, when we put murals and stuff up and barriers, that's just covering up what's actually there instead of creating a solution to the problems that's really in that neighborhood. And I think in some neighborhoods, I think trade schools and things of that nature, seeing that I have a 14-year-old son, that a lot of people in the neighborhood, you know, but they always said my son had manners, but he was just going with the fish because he was new here. And I said, how on the income collar would that be inclusive for all citizens without political or corporation interest in designing our neighborhoods? For an example, the shoppers that was providing sustainable food with people dealing with diabetes and stuff, that was taken out, and then a lesser place, Liz, another example of Aldi's or Save-A-Lot, they have more salty products and stuff that was damaging, and then we have a Dairy Queen built there. To me, if you're talking about community relations with police officers, why that was not turned into a scalar rink or something of that nature, so kids in that area, instead of hanging at the shopping place, could also go up there, and it also would teach proper etiquette with interaction with the police and people not knowing you from crime or hanging out, but saying, hey, you know, if the age appropriate time, you have 6 and 8 year olds going at this time, you have teenagers going at this time, and people in blue dress casually to communicate with those people, to build better solutions. And I'm summing it up. Mixed use began to move problems from one area to the next without pushing aside overlooked issues causing depression, crime, and other issues. And I say that because when people put murals or barriers up and they see transition of other people moving into the new, as Kansas City called, and I hate to reference that, but that's my experience, it's kind of traumatic, that when you suffer, when people that's changing, and I've used myself as an example, a person that was affiliated with Crips and then went to college and taught people how to change that blue. My university I went to was Rockhurst University, and it was blue and silver colors, blue and gold. So I was teaching people that I ran with to change that way that people look at us into a positive thing, and actually got people to go to become nurses, LPNs, truck drivers. Like, it's a lot of people that really change the demographics. And I think instead of us always just complaining, because baby boomers, no disrespect, they was the working class. We get that. However, baby boomers don't have the same knack or the same cultivation as some of our grandparents did. They're kind of impatient. Moving on, and I'm ending here. Acquisition of income sure has declined since equity of home ownership, old versus new. Elite or breadwinners above poverty should not just be the only voice to improvement. And then I think it just start division of PTSD, going back to what I said. If you have a broken city, it's causing more crime when you copy and paste instead of actually cultivating the issue that's down there and making it better. So I just wanted to be inclusive in that. I'm sorry, not just saying rehabs, however, trade schools for drug dealers to understand sustainable income, to be rehabilitated themselves through blue collar jobs, especially with new legal places of the weed. And I didn't really have too much because I don't really know your area well. I did remember her as she came up here to talk. Before COVID, I helped clean up with them. And I still am active in the community I've been discouraged a lot of my own personal issues, but the fight is still here. It's like, you really want to see a different world, and you tired of politicians coming in and just pushing people and saying, oh, they're never going to change. You have to change that frame. Even with guns, like I told Chicago when I spoke at one of their meetings, if you taking kids early ages and showing them hunting and fishing, because in suburban areas, they have places for their kids to go actually see hunting and fishing and those things. If you start young youth of going on those type of field trips, then it might not stop your gang or your gun violence all the way like a tool, but you got to start teaching people different mindsets. And lastly, I'm not a homeowner, but if I'm on subsidized housing and the owner is not taking care of the house, but when you have new, like the Dairy Queen, which caused the market value in those neighborhoods to go up, and you have those homeowners that's pushing for bigger rent, that's caused, I don't want to move everywhere. If I have a voucher, I want to stay in that neighborhood to 3 to 5 years or more, and maybe buy my house in that neighborhood in which I live. I should be able to stay in my own community that was comfortable when I didn't have enough to when I have enough. That's the reason of us building community blocks.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Have a good day.
Mr. Tiso, we didn't have anyone online that wanted to speak, did they?
No, other than that one comment, I'm not seeing any hands or other comments, sir.
Thank you. Do you want to speak as well, ma'am? Yes, something like that. Please step to the microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Mayer. I live in Brooklyn, and my family's business has been in Brooklyn since 1945. I've watched what's happened to my neighborhood. I want to address the behavioral health clinics, and I just want to give you something to consider. I want to say in 2015, we had 0, and now we have over 16, and in a couple of months, we're going to have up to 20. So at the corner of Patapsco Avenue and Hanover Street, there's a bus stop. Now, we talked to MTA, and I want to say the Mass Transit Administration, and they did a study. The average bus stop in Baltimore City has about 70 passengers at that stop. The one on Hanover Street in Patapsco has almost 300. And they're all people that are going to these different behavioral health clinics. We don't have masses of people walking through our neighborhoods going to these places. They're all coming from the outside. And it's gotten so bad, I have a neighbor that uses the bus to go to work. She was constantly late because there were so many other people there waiting to go back to wherever they were coming from that her boss said to her, if you continue to be late, I'm gonna have to fire you. So now she literally walks to a bus stop in Anne Arundel County because it's easier and quicker for her to be able to get her job. So those are the kind of things that these businesses that are helping to contribute to bad things in our neighborhood. And like I said, I've been in Brooklyn my entire life. By the way, our business still has the original brick facade on it. So it's not painted over. I just want you to take those kind of things into consideration. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
To add to what Ms. Jan was saying earlier, GBA, one of the organizations, they're trying to work with the community on a main street, which would be a part of this commercial corridor. And so they have a certain vision that they would like to see for the corridor, which would explain some of the reasons for the prohibited uses to prevent some of those businesses from coming and taking space for that vision. And then they also have a facade improvement program, where they do work with local businesses to improve the facade. So I did just want to add that about the Main Street vision for the corridor.
Thank you. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak? That will close the public comment.
Can I make one more statement real quick?
Very quickly, you have to step back up to the microphone.
So,
And I never let people do this. I have a very strict reputation.
very sweet. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. So Brooklyn has over 40% of Baltimore City's behavioral health methadone clinics in it. That's another thing, just to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. So my comment, and, we should discuss, I think, this is an imperfect tool. I said I personally, respect the community's intent behind this, but we as a city need a better tool to manage this because many communities have the same concern. It sounds like this may be one of the worst of them, but we have to find a way to manage this and also manage it equitably, because if we keep doing this, one neighborhood at a time, it just pushes them to the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood. So, we need to figure out what's right, what's going to be allowed, so that we can allow the same thing everywhere. But right now, these bad actors are just running rampant in our communities, and I think for now, we have to give the neighborhoods whatever tools they can use in the meantime.
I'd like to add on to that, and with a request to the department. I would be, as a way of understanding this a little bit better, I mean, this has been a topic that's been going on for decades. And I understand a lot of departments' position, but I would certainly like to see if it'd be possible to map the clinics in Baltimore and Baltimore County. It's probably been done.
Oh, it's been done. I don't know if it's been done recently, but half a dozen years ago it was done. And there was a great disparity in Charles North between where people lived and where they received treatment.
So I just have to agree with you, Eric. Because this is a problem that needs to be addressed equitably for everyone in central Maryland. So, thanks.
The only place it's really working, I think, is in southeast Baltimore, where Bayview, where it's all inside a hospital complex. All the most 99% of the treatment's inside a hospital. It's not true in the rest of the city, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree totally with the full issue that the city faces. I'm trying to come back. I know there's been efforts every couple of years, and there was one that kind of got derailed by the pandemic to work internally to look at what we can do. And I know there was efforts in Old Goucher in central Baltimore to work on that. Yeah, so I'm trying to do something similar because I recognize the same issue of what we try to look at the legal limits for as to this specific URP. I mean, healthcare clinic, yeah, it feels clunky to ban all of them, but that won't be a ADA violation as long as you treat all outpatient treatment facilities the same as any other doctor's office, then that should be fine. So that seems fine to me, and I get what the concern is for the community. My concern is the residential care facility. That's for if you treat housing that's for people with protected class differently than any other kind of housing. That's a violation. That's pretty clear, and we've been sued as a city. So my desire would be to think about, if there's no time sensitivity, even wait till next planning commission meeting to think through what could be put in the URP, if not licensing, like require an MOU or something to that effect that could pass muster, that would have a higher standard, maybe on all residential. Any group home, any home that has multiple units has to have an MOU with the community associations or something to that effect to give them some kind of hook. So if that's one thought I've been kicking around, and maybe we can help, and I can help get the law department to join a meeting to kick that around. That's one thought, and I have other thoughts, but to stay on that topic, I'll stop there.
I learned a lot today, and also I think we are under a time constraint, and also want to respect the community. But following up on Justin, it would help me if we did get sort of the law department could give us a briefing on what we can do, what we can do, what will be the risk of some of the decisions we've made. I think that would help me in terms of my decision making. I mean, it helps that you are an attorney and you are bringing up these questions, but it would be good to kind of have them give us, at least would help me just to understand what some of the risks are for a decision I might make today.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I mean, one action that seemed to be successful in the past was to acknowledge that most of these facilities have state funding in them, and from a wide variety of agencies that do not coordinate amongst themselves. So one technique was to work with the state funding agencies to, for example, impose a distance standard or a performance standard essentially through the funding mechanism rather than through the zoning regulation. And it takes a lot of work to wrestle all those cats, but that might be a long-term solution to this.
Yeah, I know generally it may have been difficult to get state help, but with the new administration, maybe we get more cooperation from our partners there.
And this is a city council bill, so these are recommendations.
Yes. Yeah, so this has to go, I'm looking at Eric, this has to go through this commission to get to the council before the end of the year.
So
I mean, I guess I propose Well, if there's a will to go forward for time sensitivity, I meant, I still propose to strike the residential care facility prohibition, because it violates the Fair Housing Act. I think it's allowed for 16 and under, so we could prohibit it 17 or more.
What if we flag it and defer to the law department?
I mean, I guess give us the not be sued, or to be able to sleep better at night. Yeah, I mean, if that's where the rest of my commissioners are, I get it. So that's be one idea. I have a couple other things. So why have the mic?
Yeah.
The daycare adult, I mean, we can't define that, so I propose to just prohibit daycare for adults.
Delete that.
Yeah, or allow it for children, so however we need to phrase it in the table, or define it in a separate asterisk or something to say daycare for children is allowed. And then this is maybe for Jasmine, looking at the design provisions, like there's a reference to an NPS or the NPS preservation brief. That's the National Park Service, but that's something where like I don't know where that came from. So I just want to make sure that's accurate, and a couple other things. So, but the big one is the daycare. I guess for another amendment that would be added to this would be just allow daycare for children.
How thinly do we define daycare in the zoning? I mean, does the zoning code distinguish between adult and child?
Their daycare is listed as a combined, it could be either. So it's one land use category, but I believe that the URP could be more specific for a subset within that, and be defensible. Where we get into trouble is where, and this is another South Baltimore example from years ago, and apparently this buy-sell store has meaning. I'm not from this part of Maryland, but apparently that's a known thing. But I was like, what does that use mean? But when you're completely undefined, that causes trouble. But since daycare is defined as including both, I think we can understand one versus the other.
Thank you. I mean, I would prefer that we defer to the law on that one question, not hold this up for the community. So I would be supportive of that as well.
I guess to add to my rationale is saying if we could help build something, if law, which I suspect will flag it and say it's not allowed, I guess they can always come back, but to give something, so if we had time to think about it and say, hey, could we do a licensing or require an MOU with Greater Baybrook or Action Baybrook, that'd be something. But I recognize the speed, so if we need to go forward, we need to go forward.
Yeah, I think what many of these communities realize is there are other ways to tackle the problem through licensing, but that can be a tortuous process. And that's a huge burden on a community to pursue every licensee. And maybe it's easy to enforce, maybe it's not. It's a lot to hang your hat on, so.
It also starts to sound like conditional by ordinance, where you've got the.
It's one of the thoughts.
Where's our former colleague?
One of the food for thought item, though, for the community, if we think about this further, is I recognize even the bad actors for the motor vehicle repair shops. Like maybe that should be in the URP as like have a higher standard for higher violation penalty threshold or something to really have a better stick for communities like this one are active and they're putting 20 complaints in. They should be able to shut it down or be more forceful.
Yeah, they're very problematic in a number of communities, and because we see it a lot through my department, where vehicles are just abandoned, stuffed with trash, and then we have to come in and clean out the trash, tow the vehicle. You know, and this is what they're dealing with on a daily basis. They can be an asset or a real horror.
Any other thoughts on how to move forward? So we've got
You got a second page of the amendments anymore?
the recommendation, the staff recommendation is approval with amendments. We've discussed a couple additional amendments here. I think that's where we currently are in terms of a potential motion.
Should we remove the reference to my side?
I like it.
I didn't see, I didn't see it in the,
Just likes the name.
The councilman's left, so.
Sounds like a Italian sports car.
no, there's a maritime industrial zoning district, that's MI, so it's not the MIZOD, so I think it's fine.
This specific refers to MIZOD.
What, the,
2 paragraphs under chart 1. It could just have been.
Oversight.
page 9?
It's just an oversight.
Page 9 on the top is, that's maritime industrial.
Same thing, right? Is that what it's?
Well, the MIZOD was the old version, now it's MI.
Yeah, just so it may just be a change in the title.
No, I don't think it's not, it's the current, this is, I think it's accurately reflecting the current version of the MI zone, which is.
It's on page 9, top of page 9.
Yeah.
Well, there's no MIZOD zone in the urban renewal plan. That's-
It used, yeah, I mean, the current term for the MI zone is the maritime industrial zone district.
Okay. Are we taking the rest of the staff amendments as proposed?
And we're good with the table, the zoning categories.
So,
And are we removing body art establishment or not? I mean,
Removing it from prohibited. So allowing it.
okay.
well, I guess, I don't know what are technical edits. Do you have a list somewhere of the technical edits for legal sufficiency?
No.
Oh, how do we, what are we dumping on the council?
That's all right.
Oh, no, that
Say that
was
with love.
for, specifically for legal, when they do like a final, when they do another, like, look through. There's not like a specific.
Right, so I think the question is who's writing down our additional amendments?
No,
Oh.
that's separate. My question was, well, yeah, and if our report will say, we recommend you make technical edits, but I don't know what technical edits, what edits am I recommending they make, are we recommending they make?
I think there was a page for that, with some language corrections and things. Is that what you're referring to, Jasmine?
Oh, were you about to say something?
Yeah, in your staff report, is there a specific, is this list in your staff report?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I did not
We're all
understand
over
correctly.
the place.
Yeah, but yeah, this entire list is in the staff report.
No, but the specific bullet point that says technical edits for legal sufficiency. What are those edits, if anything?
Oh, that I was saying if there were like any additional edits today, or if legal like went through again and saw something that like there wasn't anything specific. It was more of like a general.
So
Right,
that
but
can
I
be
guess-
disregarded for purposes of today.
Yeah,
To answer
fa-
your question.
Yeah.
Because we can't.
Right, I was referring to the third bullet, edits to design guidelines.
Those make sense, yeah. Well, I guess Eric's drafting this anyway, so make Eric.
So just to
Eric-
make
Eric will
sure-
draft it fine.
So just making sure, because yes, I will be the one writing the cover memo. I have, and we'll go through this list to make sure that to the extent anything conflicts, it's clarified. I heard that we're encouraging that law department look at the limits on group homes to make sure that the restrictions proposed are legal enforceable. We want to permit daycare for children. There was a National Park Service NPS reference that we need to just verify if that's current and correct. Again, I haven't read through all this, so I don't know the subject material. I think I've heard that MI was the reference, not MIZOD. MI is the Maritime Industrial Zone, which is in today's code. So if it says MI, it's fine, but we'll double check. And then permitting body art establishments. That's the list that I've heard to this point. Am I missing anything or misstating anything?
Good. So everything I moved to adopt.
Do that.
Move to approve with the the amendments that Mr. Tissot just read out.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn.
Who was second?
Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen. No. Marcia Collins,
Approve as amended.
Talib Horn,
Approve as amended.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve with amendments.
Doug McCoach,
Approve as amended.
Justin Williams,
Approve as amended.
and Eric Stevenson.
Approve as amended.
And Mr. Chair, I have Commissioner Allen's vote as approved as amended by chat.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes this afternoon's meeting. We'll see you all in 3 weeks.